mrballen. This is the top 3 scariest true stories. It's in his spooky stories part 1 section. So let's see what we got today.
Is very simple, scary stories. But before I get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel because that's all we do, and we upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please eat all of the like button's Oreos except for one and put it back in the...
So, like and subscribe to Mr. Ballen. He's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. The dude can make any normal story sound scary. So definitely go like and subscribe on most platforms and follow.
In the pantry, and then also crumple all of their potato chips. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories. In 2010, an avid caver named Jeff decided to go to Madagascar to explore a natural cave shaft he had discovered years earlier. He arrived in country, he got a rental car, and he hired a guide to take him out to the area where he knew this cave was going to be. When he got out to that area, he used his notebook where he had taken notes the last time he was here, and he used that to find the opening to the cave. He paid the guide to stick around at the car while he went down and explored this cave. He assured him it was not going to be for a very long time. The shaft was approximately 50 meters deep. Today's theme.
So we actually seen this one, so let me skip to another one. We've seen this one in the video yesterday. So
go big on baseball this season.
Today's theme is 2 meters
let me
down.
Skip ahead.
A 14-year-old boy named Evan lived on a farm in North Carolina. Cave, but luckily he doesn't get bit. He gets in the car with a guide, and they start heading back towards the city. As they're driving, he takes his notebook out and he scratches off the title he had given this cave. Evan lived on a farm in North Carolina. Too. He scratches that out, and on top of it, he writes, "The entrance to hell."
So this
in 2006, a 14-year-old boy named Evan lived on a farm in North Carolina. This was not a typical farm with animals and crops. It was a pine tree harvestry. Pine needles are a big landscaping commodity, and Evan and his family made their living baling pine straw every year. As such, their main living house on the farm was situated right in the middle of 550 acres of perfectly lined up pine trees. They did not have any neighbors nearby, and there was only one road that led into the property, which from the main house, they could look out and basically see through the rows of trees all the way to the beginning of this road, which meant any visitors were really easy to spot. The main house was built on a very slight hill, which meant one side of the house was effectively built on stilts to compensate for the angle. And on that side of the house, on the first floor, was the living room. So anyone who was in the living room looking out the window, they'd basically need to look at a downward angle to see the ground. It would actually seem like you were on the second floor, but really you're on the first floor. The window in the living room was very unique. It stretched almost the...
So
today, I'm going to share
sure
3 stories that scared me. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and...
Yeah, so a lot of his stories get depending if you watch them when they're brand new, they'll just show just the story, and then he'll go back and do a compilation of different stories that he groups together. So I'm pretty sure the part 1 we've seen in different videos, or maybe that exact video. So let's go ahead and skip to his second spooky stories part 2. Let's see what this
Scariest delivered in story format, and you come to the right channel because that's all we do, and we upload 3 or 4 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please kidnap the like button, tie them up, and then forcibly brush their teeth, and then make them drink orange juice afterwards. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories. In 2010, Kayla was a senior at the University of California, Santa Barbara, a big party school. And one Friday evening, Kayla and her friends were at a big party, and Kayla was having a great time, but she was starting to feel really tired. And so she asked her friends if maybe they wanted to leave early, but none of them did. And so Kayla left on her own. Luckily, her house was just down the road, and so she was at her front door in a matter of minutes. That night, her two roommates, who were also college seniors, had decided to stay in and just have a nice night with a couple of friends having some wine. And so when Kayla walked inside, she happened to turn to the right, and she looked on the closest wall where there was a sofa, and she...
I feel like we've seen that one too.
So Bespoke Post, they just send
Let's
you
skip
a cool
to
box
another
every
one and
month.
see where we're at.
This is kind of awesome.
False episode. So we watched 9. So let's watch number 1. So sorry about the skipping back and forth. Some of these videos are, like I said, played once before, so I don't want to let y'all watch them twice.
On July 17th, 1983, 8 days after Michael is found, another person goes missing in the same section of Roan Mountain. And I've got to say, their story sounds an awful lot like Michael's. So on July 17th, 1983, Larry
So go back to what I was saying before. A lot of his stories are like jump together. So sometimes he'll start a new story at the end of an old story. So sometimes you're not sure what he's talking about. But we're going to start this one from here.
Davenport, who is a 20-year-old avid hiker, decides to head up to Roan Mountain with a couple of his friends to go on a hike. They really liked the western side of Roan Mountain. They were very eager to get up to the top where they could have a picnic before the sun went down. So they make it up to this section of the mountain where it's actually a campsite, and it's not that far from where Michael went missing. And there's picnic tables, and there's little barbecues. You can put in charcoal briquettes and have your own little barbecue. They get up there and they set up their picnic on one of the picnic tables. And they're having a great time, they're joking, they're laughing. And at some point, Larry takes off his shirt and his shoes. And the weather was pretty good. Wasn't super hot out, but it was decent enough that no one thought it was odd that he was taking off his clothes and maybe kicking back and relaxing, enjoying the nice weather. Then at some point, out of nowhere, he stands up and he starts walking over to the tree line.
Mr. Ballen's the
because they were
best.
in a bit of a clearing.
Hey,
and
how
as
you
he's
doing?
walking over, one of his friends would later say that it seemed odd if he was going to, relieve himself in the tree line, that he wouldn't take his shoes. Because the risk of stepping on something and puncturing your foot's pretty high. It was only in retrospect that this friend thought of that. At the time, his friends didn't think twice. He's getting up to relieve himself. He'll be back in a minute. After a few moments, when Larry did not come back, somebody turned around to see what he was doing. And they saw him walking in a straight line away from them, well into the forest. This is a thick forest. It's not somewhere you're going to go walking barefoot without a shirt on. And he is way into the woods at this point. The friends have this moment of shock. Even if he needed to relieve himself, he would have done it much closer to the edge. So they're staring at him, thinking like, this isn't really happening. He's gonna turn around and come back. When he didn't, somebody yelled like, hey, Larry, what are you doing? Doesn't turn around, just keeps walking. So they get up and they start walking over. They're yelling to him, expecting him to turn around. And then at some point, he's far enough away that they can't even see him anymore. They start running into the forest, yelling for him to stop and to come back. But as they got farther and farther in and they couldn't find him, they began to get worried that they were going to get lost. And so they decide, after about an hour of just yelling for him and kind of peering around to hopefully get a look at him, thinking he might just come back because there was no explanation for this, they eventually called the authorities. Authorities are able to very quickly launch a massive search in this area, very similar to the search that was launched for Michael, except without military involvement.
So that was that. Going back to what I was saying, a lot of his stories are continuations of other stories, and they're just like part. So like it ends and it starts. So with this story, it's a similar story from I believe the 401 books that he reads all the time about. Kind of like the same situation in the same area, people going missing, people acting strange. If you're just tuning in, this is a continuation of another story that's similar that he's telling from the 401 books.
But it was just as many people, hundreds of people, scouring this area. He doesn't have shoes on, he doesn't have a shirt on. And so they're banking on the idea that even though he's walked off for some reason, he can't go very far. It's going to take a minute, but they're going to find him because he can't escape the search party. But he does. And after 3 days of not finding this guy, despite this massive effort, people are baffled. But on the third day, a very strange but lucky break in the case occurred. 8 miles away from where the search is happening for Larry, a group of hikers called into police that they had seen a man walking around them wearing only what they described as a bed sheet. He was probably not wearing a shirt. They didn't know if he had pants on or not, but they could see that, his shin down had nothing on it, and he had no shoes on, and he had this bed sheet wrapped around him. And he wasn't coming towards them. He wasn't threatening them in any way. He just looked like there's something wrong with this guy. Somebody needs to collect this guy and see what's going on. And so the police go over, and sure enough, it's Larry. When police got to Larry, he was visibly shaken, confused. He didn't really even know why he was there. He didn't know why he had this bed sheet wrapped around him, which it would turn out to be a large curtain, not a bed sheet. He did have a few scratches on his body, but probably not as many as they anticipated him having, considering the distance he had covered. 8 miles through thick rhododendron thickets. He should have been covered head to toe in cuts, but he wasn't, but he had a few. So the first thing they did is they brought him to a hospital, and he was diagnosed with something called acute brain syndrome, which is a term that refers to a host of psychiatric conditions that are temporary and diffuse over time that are caused by head injury, drugs, or infection. Basically, he was totally mentally unstable, but it would get better over time. Once he stabilized a bit, investigators asked him, what happened? So Larry wasn't sure why he left his friends.
So, like, a common theme with all these 411 cases, and I forget where the national park that most of these happen is the people tend to not remember, not know why they're doing, and them missing and reappearing, and how they got here and how they got there. So that's a common theme with these stories that seem kind of odd. But one by one, he's going through the 411 cases and getting the similarities and putting them out there to us.
But at some point after leaving his friends, he wound up at this abandoned cabin. And he describes the cabin, and he says where it is, and he said he went in the cabin and he didn't have clothes on, so he pulled one of the curtains off one of the windows and he wrapped it around himself, and he was there for a bit before ultimately leaving the cabin, and then he was discovered. And so investigators, they had a bunch of issues with this because, number one, how do we account for you traveling 8 miles? Because what you've just described is not an 8-mile journey. You're talking about a very
And with, like, the whole, like, how you get here to there, there's a lot of stories where there's kids, and they're doing, like, miles of, like rough terrain, like, literally unscathed within, like, record-breaking times, where even a couple of these cases, some wilderness gurus and, like, people that have, like, outdoor shows try to do the length that these kids and these people have done and the time frame they did it and couldn't do it. So it's just amazing how people wind up, like, disappearing, reappearing, like, here and then miles and miles away. It's crazy.
Short journey. In addition, where you described this cabin is an area that was heavily searched by the hundreds of people that did the search, and no one saw a cabin. And certainly if they had, they would have searched the cabin. It is the most obvious place that someone lost in the woods would go. There's no cabins in that area. So where was he? And where did he get the curtain from? And so just like the Michael Reel case, where the boy is found and he's healthy, and so everyone looks past the weirdness of his discovery and his story because he's alive, that's what happened to Larry Davenport. Very strange story. Don't know what you're doing walking around with a curtain on you, and I don't think that cabin exists, but you're alive, so we're okay with it. No one really did much research into the weirdness around these two stories. But David Paulides and the Missing 411 team said...
So yeah, that's David Paulides. I actually need to get these books. Mr. Ballen, like, the way these books sound, and like it's always awesome to hear it. I love stories. Like, I'm that kid that used to hang around their parents and their grandparents and get the scary stories and just be like like frightened to death, couldn't sleep for 2 weeks. That'd be me. But like these books, man, like the stories he's getting from these books are like real stories and documented by police officers and different people, and they're just crazy. I have to get this book. I have to get this series.
It's pretty difficult to overlook the fact that in a very short period of time, two different people that didn't know each other, that were not interacting in any way, went missing in roughly the same area, Roan Mountain, North Carolina side, under the same circumstances. They suddenly got up and walked away inexplicably. There's no trace of them. Dogs can't pick up their scent. Then they show up and they're kind of confused about how they got there, but here they are. And then they describe the same cabin that they found themselves being drawn to and staying inside of for significant amounts of time before being found again.
And two underlining things that he kind of hints at all the time. One being like Bigfoot. There's a lot of stories that like he doesn't necessarily say it's Bigfoot, but like it gives you like a Bigfoot vibe. And then with these stories, it's like UFOs, and so with like you seeing this cabin, it's like different things like people seeing like images that are like really not there. There's a bunch of stories, and as we go more and more into his stories that he tells from the 401 books, you'll see what I'm talking about.
That seems like too much of a coincidence to just write off. So, I would like to hear what you think happened to these two people. Was the cabin a hallucination? And if so, how did they both evade such a massive search effort? Or was it real? And who was the person in the cabin with Michael? So that's going to do it, guys. If you found the secret in today's video, let us know.
So definitely like and subscribe to all his platforms for his social media. All the content is belong to him. I'm just doing my reaction to it because it's interesting. After this video, we're going to start a new one. So I'm going to go ahead and skip to the next one and get started. Pass this commercial real quick. Seems kind of crazy. So, Lost episode number 11. These are not in order. I should have been able to go find that and find the order, but it's fun just to jump around, see what we got.
It was the day after Christmas in 2010, and Catherine Kleiss was really excited about the upcoming week. She and her husband, Jack Wheeler, had started this tradition where the week between Christmas and New Year's, they would turn off their cell phones, close their laptops, they wouldn't work, and they would just sit around watching movies together the whole week. But that day, Jack would tell Catherine, much to her dismay, that he wasn't going to be around for that week because he had business in Washington, D.C., and it was really important and he couldn't miss it. Catherine was really upset and disappointed and initially kind of lashed out at Jack, but Catherine would say that she wasn't exactly surprised. Jack was a prominent consultant and a former Pentagon official. He traveled a ton for work. So Jack leaves for this trip, and Catherine kind of anticipates that they're not going to speak while he's gone. They didn't really end on good terms, and typically when they fought...
That's one thing I never understand. Like, even though, like, you're working and you're doing the 9 to 5, like, to be totally cut off like that for, like, weeks or days at a time, I just never understood that. Like, I work in a place where I deal with like electronics and cell phones and stuff like that, but regardless of me doing that every day, I don't want to be like totally cut off. It's just, I don't know, especially when you ended up on a bad note and you're fighting with somebody. That's just don't seem smart. You never know when you need to reach out and talk to somebody.
They would go long periods of time without talking to each other. But as much as Catherine wanted to be stubborn and not talk to him, they had a wedding they were supposed to go to together at the end of the week, and Catherine needed to coordinate travel with Jack. And so after a couple of days that he's been in D.C. and she hasn't heard from him, she puts her ego aside and she calls him. Her call went straight to voicemail, and then she called a couple more times, and again, all of them went straight to voicemail. She texted him, no response. She emailed him, no response. Catherine interprets this as Jack trying to ignore her, and she's furious, and she ends up going to the wedding by herself. After the wedding was over, she gets back to her house, and she still hasn't heard from Jack, but she's so mad and so stubborn that he was doing this on purpose, she still didn't think anything was wrong. She really believed.
See, and that's like the real problem. Like, you get so stuck in yourself, like, you can't see past it. Yeah, I mean that's always going to end up in bad and tragedy. Like either someone's going to take it personal, something's actually going to happen. In this case, it seems like it's going down the actually going to happen road.
That he was stonewalling her. But on January 2nd, 2011, Catherine would get a phone call that would show her that Jack was never stonewalling her. He was never ignoring her. He was dead. Back on the day after Christmas, right after Jack has told Catherine that, sorry, I'm not going to be around this week, he gathers up his things and he heads to the Amtrak train station and boards a train to Washington, D.C. Jack arrives in Washington, D.C., and for the next couple of days, he has a very ordinary business trip. On December 28th, the day he's supposed to come home, things get a little bit weird. Instead of going back to New York, where he lived with Catherine, he bought a train ticket to go to Wilmington, Delaware. Now, he owned a house about 20 minutes away from Wilmington, but he had never indicated to Catherine or to anyone in his family that he'd be spending any time at this residence following this trip. No one knows what Jack did that night in Delaware or where he stayed. All we know is on the following day, on December 29th, he got in a cab and asked to go to a particular hotel in Wilmington. The police would get in touch with this cab driver who would say he was completely normal. He just looked like a business guy that wanted to go to this hotel. We had small talk in the cab and I dropped him off and that was it. Around 9:30 in the morning that day, Jack sends an email to his company that says his home has been broken into and his cell phone along with his badge, his work badge, and a key fob and his briefcase have all been stolen. After that email, we don't know what Jack did over the course of that day because he was not spotted again until 6 p.m. that night when he walked into a pharmacy and walked up to a random pharmacist and said, "Hey, can you give me a ride somewhere?" The pharmacist would tell police that when Jack came in there and asked him for a ride, he looked really upset, but overall, more or less put together. He had a suit on, he looked like he genuinely just needed some help. But the pharmacist just had a weird feeling about it and said, "Look, I can't give you a ride, but I'd be happy to call you a cab." Jack would decline the offer for a cab and would leave the pharmacy. 40 minutes later, a surveillance camera...
So he goes into a pharmacy and asks the pharmacist for a ride. Yeah, something's going on. Like, either he's under the influence or he's being pursued by somebody. Like, that's just like the weirdest scenario and the weirdest person to ask for help, and then you decline a cab ride.
In a parking garage would capture Jack acting totally bizarre. He walks into frame and immediately it's like something's off about him. His suit looks kind of wrinkled and rumpled and he's walking with a limp and he's only got one shoe on because the other shoe is being held in his other hand for some reason. He goes up to the attendant and he points his finger at them like he's upset about something. And apparently what he was saying to them is, "Someone stole my briefcase," but there's no audio on the footage. And then he turns and walks down the hall and he opens up a door into the garage, pokes his head around like he's looking for something, shuts the door and comes back. And apparently he was saying to the attendant, "I'm looking for my car, can you help me find it?" And no one really knew what to do with the guy. And just as quickly as he had arrived and made this kind of weird scene, he abruptly left and didn't tell anyone where he was going. Nobody knows where he went after the parking garage or where he stayed that night, but the next day, on December 30th, Jack walked into this high-rise office building. He goes right up to the front desk attendant in the lobby, and he asked to speak with a managing partner at one of the law firms that was inside of this office building. The attendant calls up to the law firm, and the lawyer is notified, who says he'll be down in a minute, but by the time he got down to the lobby to meet with Jack, Jack was gone. We don't know what Jack...
Yeah, so I actually hit the wrong button, but that just seems kind of weird that he asked for his lawyer and then didn't wait. It seems like his job at Pentagon or something that he was doing on the side might have caught up to him. So this is episode 8, so we went from 9 to 1 to 11 to 8 now.
John Lin was a 33-year-old international undergraduate student from Wuhan, China. He moved to Montreal, Canada in 2010 to study engineering and computer science. And according to his best friend, Benjamin Zhu, Lin had also moved to Canada because Lin was actually gay, just not openly. And back home in China, he had hid that from his family and from society because he felt pressure to, conform. And he had even married a woman to keep up appearances. But that relationship ended in divorce, and he ultimately decided,
That's sad when you can't show like how you truly feel and who you truly are. You have to hide it. Going so far as to marry someone that you might love but not truly in love with. That's just society nowadays. It's sad. Yeah. And then honestly, stuff like that could just break a person too.
I need to be myself. I need to go someplace that can allow me to do that. And he saw Canada as that place.
Yeah.
So Lin gets to Montreal,
he had to
and by all accounts, he's really pleased with the
He had to flee
accepting
from his
liberal
home
culture
to
there. It
feel
was everything
comfortable.
he
That's
hoped
sad.
it would be. But Lin was notoriously shy and reserved, and after living in Canada for about a year or so, he hadn't really built a very big network at all. He only had a handful of very close friends. Lin did go out and get a cat that he absolutely adored and treated like a baby, and it seems like the cat might have been his closest companion in that first year and a half. But in early 2012, Lin finally reached a point where he was like, you know what? I need to put myself out there and make some new friends. I need to get uncomfortable to expand my network a little bit. And so he went on Craigslist in hopes that he would find someone basically asking for a friend.
Okay, so Craigslist is the last place that you ever want to... Like, it's the worst app out there. Like, there's so many crooked people on that, and I feel like we're just going to get into a story of somebody getting, like, messed up or killed or hurt over how bad that app is.
He would find an ad from a guy named Luca Magnotta, who was roughly his age, who was asking for guys that wanted to be in a homemade movie with him. But he explicitly said in the post that it was nothing inappropriate.
Okay, that's, like, red flags right there. I keep pausing it, but, like, why do people, like, fall for this stuff? It's, like, the worst case scenarios always. You, like, anything you think is too good, it is definitely is.
It was just a fun, homemade movie, and apparently Lin thought, this is exactly what I'm looking for. This is an easy way to make a friend, and he reached out to Luca, and the two set a date to meet up. Unfortunately for Lin, this Craigslist ad was bait. 1 year before Luca...
Like I said, going back to what I previously... Craigslist is, like, the worst place to do anything. Like, when people put stuff on there, it's always in the worst content. Like, nothing ever good's coming out of Craigslist.
Posted that Craigslist ad asking for someone to be in his movie with him. He had made another kind of movie. It was called One Boy, Two Kittens, and it was Luca filming himself suffocating two cats to death. Luca posted this video anonymously and took great measures to ensure on camera he didn't give anything away about himself. He wanted to shock the world with this video, but he didn't want to get caught. Now, once this video started getting spread around the internet and people saw that this wasn't a hoax, it was a real horrible video, a large Facebook group was started with the sole purpose being, let's figure out who did this. Let's figure out who made this video. And they painstakingly went through every single scene in this horrible video, and they were able to pull quite a bit of information about who the person was that created this video, but they didn't have enough information to identify who it really was. But when Luca uploaded a second and then third video of him again harming more cats, this Facebook group started to recognize a pattern. Luca was incorporating very specific music into the background of these videos, as well as a couple of posters that were intentionally placed in the shot of these videos. And it became clear that Luca was trying to recreate certain scenes from certain movies. And it was through these movie references that they determined Luca was in Canada, and then using one of the still shots from a picture he had posted, they figured out exactly in Canada where he was. And so they felt like they had finally nailed this guy, and they reach out to Canadian authorities and they say, hey, we have this guy, he's harming animals, and he's showing all the signs that he's gonna do this to a human at some point. We know exactly where he lives, we know his name, we know everything about him. Here you go arrest this guy. But the Canadian authorities basically said, it's just cats. We really can't do much.
So, I mean, there's laws for harming animals, but just to not even like investigate it or keep it like in a file somewhere, that's terrible.
About this, and they sat on it. They didn't do anything. Fast forward to May 24th, 2012, and it's the day that Lynn and Luca Magnotta are supposed to meet up to make this fun movie. There is security footage of Lynn meeting up with Luca right outside of Luca's apartment in Montreal, Canada. They walk up to the front door. Lynn has a yellow shirt on. Luca has a white shirt on. Luca opens the door, Lynn follows after him, and the two walk down the hall and up the stairs and out of view. They make their way up to room 208, that was Luca's apartment. They go inside, and Luca offers Lynn some wine that he had put some very heavy sedative into, and Lynn didn't know this. Lynn drinks the wine, and he becomes lethargic and tired, but he's not totally unconscious. Luca brings Lynn over to the bed, and he has him lay down, and then he ties his arms and his legs to the bed as he's laying on his back. And then Luca turns on some music, and he gets a camera on a tripod, and he sets it up at the base of the bed, looking at Lynn. Luca hits record, and you can see that Lynn is still conscious and moving around, but he's not fighting back in any way. Luca walks up to the side of the bed, and he kind of pats Lynn on the head before getting on top of him, pulling out an ice pick, and brutally killing Lynn on camera with this ice pick. Afterwards, Luca gets off the bed. He puts on Lynn's yellow t-shirt that he had been wearing, and Luca just casually leaves his apartment and comes back with a bag filled with cleaning materials and gloves. But before he goes in to the apartment, the security camera picks him up, stopping and looking at his own reflection and checking to make sure his hair was perfectly placed behind his ears, as if there's nothing more important right now than his appearance, even though literally minutes earlier you just savagely killed someone on camera. After ensuring his hair was in just the right position, he casually walks back into the apartment building, up to his room, into the room where Lynn is. He brings him into the bathroom and chops him into pieces. He kept a few smaller pieces for himself that he eventually ate. He wrapped up the hands and feet, which he ultimately mailed to the Canadian government, and then the rest of Lynn was cut into fairly small pieces and put into trash bags. And then over the next several hours, Luca would make dozens of trips from his room down to the basement of the apartment building where he would dispose of these bags in the dumpster. The next day, on May 25th, 2012, Luca anonymously uploaded an 11-minute video called One Lunatic, One Ice Pick to the shock website Best Gore. The video was of Luca killing John Lynn. When the Facebook group that had been tracking Luca for his animal cruelty saw this video, this One Lunatic, One Ice Pick video, they instantly knew this is Luca, and they told the police and they showed them all the evidence from previous videos and why this is definitely Luca, and the police listened, and they were able to find Luca sitting in an internet cafe in Berlin, Germany, Googling himself. Luca would try to use insanity as his defense, but the Facebook group had shared with the police, and then the police shared with the prosecutors, that Luca was actually just reenacting scenes from some of his favorite movies. It was this bizarre fantasy he had, and what he did to John Lynn is eerily similar to the opening scene of Luca's favorite movie of all time, Basic Instinct. In the movie, a woman is sitting on a man who's tied up on a bed, and she reaches under the sheets and she pulls out an ice pick and proceeds to kill the man with it. Luca was quickly found guilty.
Yeah, going back to what I said before, nothing comes good out of Craigslist. So, yeah, Craigslist is probably the worst app out there, or website, or whatever you want to call it.
And sentenced to life in prison. I decided to leave out any of the footage from One Lunatic, One Ice Pick. It's truly one of the most distressing things I've ever seen, so if you want to see that, that's up to you. Instead, I included the footage of Luca and Lynn going into the apartment building together, and then Luca coming down sometime later after having killed Lynn, now wearing Lynn's shirt, and then makes all those trips to the dumpster as he's disposing of Lynn's body. So that's going to do it, guys. Let me know what you thought of these three
Crazy.
stories in the comment section, and I will pin the best comment at the top of the comment section. If you enjoyed today's video and you haven't done this already, please replace the like button's melatonin pills with caffeine pills. Also, please subscribe to this channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our...
So, yeah. So some of the videos are similar to that. Some are like true stories, but all of them are definitely videos that make you think about doing things differently. But definitely like and subscribe to his page, Mr. Bowling. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok. The dude's great. Definitely like and subscribe to my page, Mr. Insidious 1 on YouTube and Twitch. And I'll be back with some more videos here in a little bit. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it. See ya.